So I should preface the talk by saying this is the first PowerPoint I've ever put together in my life, and this is the first presentation I've ever done. So all new things. I wrote an essay about, well, I worked for the Swiftwater Resource Area for 22 different field seasons, and that encompasses pretty much everything north of Roseburg up to the Siuslaw to Elkton, so Coast Range, and then the Western Cascades up to like Steamboat. Beautiful area, incredible forests. And I came across his journals maybe a dozen years ago and was reading them, and you can get them online. And the very specific about his travels in Oregon and Washington. And when I got to the part where he comes down to my stomping grounds, where I worked as a biological science technician, wildlife surveyor, which means I'm not in meetings with people. I'm out in the field all the time, roaming around the forest looking for wildlife, which generally is not in the tree plantations, but in the old growth and native stands of our area. So that's kind of the unique perspective maybe I bring. I don't have any professional credentials other than that I like to walk around in the woods and I like plants. So to begin with, this was not a uninhabited region, obviously, that David Douglas walked through. This is from something I clipped from Requiem for a People by Stephen Eckham. Anyway, and where he's traveling is basically the Elkton is right here, the Elk Creek area, and he's in this the Athabascan linguistic dialect. People have lived in this area. There's pre-Mazama artifacts, as Native people would say. They've been here. This is where they're from. There is no other place. This is home, and you talk about hundreds of generations. So I can think back of, I don't know, 4 or 5 generations in my family, and that's about it. And there aren't really that many stories that go back that far, but these people had stories that went back to the Mazama explosion. And anyway, so first of all, to acknowledge that. The other thing is that he's coming down. This is 1826. So 1806 was when Lewis and Clark, 1805, 1806. They were the first, other than the along the coast, you had people trading in sea otters from 1700s. Lewis and Clark, 1806. He's the first botanist that's actually going to be exploring this region. David Douglas is, and it's uncertain what the Upper Umpqua peoples knew about European Americans at this point. They definitely, intermixed with tribes all the way to the Columbia. They traded whatever. They knew what was going on. They had a network. But as far as this specific area, there is a report that there was a trapping brigade that came down maybe 10 to 12 years beforehand and did not go well. 14 Native Americans were killed, and the brigade left. I don't know what David Douglas knew about that at the time. I don't know about what the people knew, where that happened, or any of that. So I'm really kind of uncertain. But it's reported that David Douglas was the first paleface to be in this area, to actually be hiking. But they're certainly unfamiliar with European Americans in the area. Okay. So who was David Douglas? This is just, you probably already know since your Native Plant Society, who he was. Born in 1799, came from kind of a humble origins. Like a lot of future naturalists, he didn't do so well in school, just liked to run around in the hills, fishing, collecting birds' nests, doing all kinds of stuff, and but was then subsequently apprenticed by a bunch of several different gardeners in gardens in Scotland, and then studied botany officially under the in Glasgow, and became a plant collector for the Horticultural Society in 1823. His first expedition was, I think, Quebec and eastern US, was successful, and then was nominated for this trip to this part of the world, and coordinated activities, the Horticultural Society with the Hudson's Bay Company. So when he arrived, he had a place to stay. They were actually moving to a new site, which became Fort Vancouver when he arrived. And they were, I'll have the sketch of his niece made of him. So this is just a slide of kind of his travels just for this 1 year, 1826. He arrived in 1825 and went all over the place. But this is just for this year, he's covering almost 4,000 miles. This is not by electric vehicle or car or train or anything. He's mostly either hiking, since there's a lot of water, a lot of canoes. Traveling companions often are native, indigenous peoples, or people associated with the trapping, which was quite a cosmopolitan group at the time. You had, Iroquois, you had French Canadian trappers, you had a lot of Scots. The Scots are intrepid as far as traveling, and McLaughlin, Scott himself, McLaughlin. Anyway, so when he comes back from this trip here, back to Fort Vancouver, so he's coming all the way from like the headwaters of the Columbia on down, and like a week later, he hears there's going to be a trapping brigade going down to the Umpqua, and he's heard that he's seen some seeds of this pine in the Multnomah, which is now the Willamette River, from some Kalapuya Indians that they had in the pouch. And they were like, where are these seeds from? I'm sure they said, oh, it's from this cone. It's like this big. And he's like, okay, I want to go see that, And so finally he has a chance to go do this in 1826. So this is his sketch and his measurements of the sugar pine. This is 57 feet 9 inch circumference and 215 feet tall. And he has the numbers here again. Since then, there's been many people have kind of speculated where he's been. John Muir did in 1870s, his Steep Trails book. He just mentions the Umpqua Hills around Roseburg. This was from 1925, so 99 years after Douglas's exploration, by Professor Sweetser he was a botanist from U of O. And I don't have access to his notes. I'd love to talk to him and figure out why he thought that it was, he mentions Sugar Pine Mountain near Roseburg. There is no Sugar Pine Mountain. Well, there's one in Eastern Oregon. There's a Sugar Pine Ridge, which is southwest of Roseburg by quite a ways. And then in the Coast Range, and then up to the Collector by Jack Nisbet. And he I emailed him and asked him why he thought that he was using Sweetser's account um, to go with. So I think a lot of people have suspected or just taken for granted where he found these pines, and but nobody has Roseburg. Nobody really goes there very much. It's kind of an interesting area, beautiful area, but okay. So why is it historically significant? Well, it's the current champion pine tree in the world is 8 feet 8 inches down in Yosemite National Park. It is a sugar pine too. This one that he's measuring is twice that size as far as diameter. Not quite as tall, but and he does mention that it's not the largest one he sees there. It's the one that's lying down that he actually can get around and measure and I guess the height and so that would make this pine and the grouping of pine, the grove of pines that he was in, probably the largest pine trees anywhere in the world ever. I don't know. So that's kind of cool. So it would be kind of nice to figure out where that was at. It's in our area, right? I put this in just because yeah, it would be very cool to identify the specific area where these pines were at. Even though it's been 200 years, the ground is still there, the terrain is still there, that grew these pines, that you could still kind of maybe do some kind of studies to figure out why was that so? What was the ecological community at that time? And the other thing is the cultural significance is a lot of people just forget about how, or don't know how incredible the forests here used to be and still are in some areas. And there tends to be like the bar continues to be lowered. I think about like kids growing up and, pretty soon they're going to see a 24-inch tree and they're going to be like, wow, this is like huge. And it's like, no, that's nothing. There's like, massive, old massive trees. So it's good to document and record that information and keep it, recycling in as far as knowledge goes. Okay. So at least I think so. Now, where is important? Because anyone who admires giant trees, native flora, and or historical plant distributions, as I imagine you all do, knowing where that is about as important as knowing what it is. It's very important to know where these species are, especially significant specimens. And these other 2 points are, again, kind of the cultural significance to acknowledge the real forests that were here at this time, at that time. And if it was there at that time, it could be again if we tended to allow forests to grow, whether we want them to sequester carbon or just be beautiful to have a picnic nearby. So how did I go about retracing his steps? One, he has detailed journals. He puts down a daily mileage of what he travels. Now there's no milepost, he doesn't have a clicker, he's not GPS or anything. So he's just doing with his mind, which probably a lot of you have done. I walk a normal pace is about 3 miles on flat ground. So then you can, when you're out there hiking, you can go, well, this is steep or it's curvy, whatever. And he's going through often a pathless forest through a lot of down trees, through a lot of vegetation. So it's really kind of an estimate. And we've all had that too, where it's just like, wow, that 5 miles felt like 20. So I definitely, I should also mention his journals. There's different variations. There's the first one that came out was a sketch that he wrote from his journals, and that was published in 1836. And his actual full journals weren't published until 1914, and those are the ones that I'm using. And those are like very detailed day to day. The sketch is kind of something he did for publication while he was still alive. The topograph. So then I use topographical maps, air photos, and then of course just my knowledge of that. You know, a lot of things don't change over 200 years. The topography isn't going to change. The river doesn't change. The geology doesn't change. And he's talking about all these things in his journal that ring bells as if you know the terrain. Oops. So this is a simple way of deducing the mileage. Each one of these squares is a square section, square mile. Now this is all like flat. So once you put in hills, mountains, the mileage changes quite a bit. But just as like a general way of mapping its use. And I'll look back at this. And this is the area that he's traveling. He comes down with the trapping brigade down into somewhere around Drain. And this is from the Umpqua Valley. He's coming down in October. The indigenous peoples have burned off the valley to collect tarweed, Medea seed. And so he complains about no good forage for the horses that they have with them. And then they head toward the coast. The trapping brigade is going to go follow the Umpqua down the river to the ocean. And so they come through here and their first camp is in Elton. And then David Douglas is headed this way. He's headed upriver. I can take a minute if you want to read this. But if not, the only reason I put this in was where I highlight where he's talking about the size of the trees they're trying to get around and traverse through. You know, we're talking about 8-foot diameter, probably mostly dug for huge trees with giant root wads the size of houses. They have horses. They're trying to find their way to get to the Umpqua River, and they're going down the Elk River or the Elk Creek, which is right here. And we encamped on the east side in the angle where the little river we marched along today falls into it. So that would be where Elk Creek runs into the Umpqua River there. I'm going to get back to that. So we're looking for wish for pine. So he starts out on the 18th from Elton. And so 5 miles due south, where they hit the Umpqua. I'll show this on a map. Where they hit the Umpqua, runs into a village site, and very courteously brought one large canoe and swam the horses in the stern and crossed the river. And then he continues his route over a small hill. And this is, you guys have ever been to 138 from, say, Sutherland to Reedsport? This is the highway you would go over. So Sutherland is down this way. Here's Elton. So the camp is here. You go up and over this small rise, drop down. This is the first crossing he's talking about. It could have been over here. somewhere around here. Then instead of following the long circuitous route, he's told just go right across this hill and you come to the river again. So that's what he's talking about right here. Continue right over a low hill, and on the other side of which I was given to understand I should again fall in the river. Now, this quote of his is important. He wants to ascend as near the high mountains as possible, lying in a southeasterly direction. So he's headed southeast. That's where he wants to go. Now, to get across, make that second crossing, he tries to build a raft. And he's no greenhorn, but he blisters his hands trying to make a raft. It turns out to be too small. He sends his guide back for help, and then ends up falling in a hole and hurting himself badly. And then the indigenous peoples help him out, and he's pretty honest about all this too. He didn't need to write this, but so I admire his honesty, and it also is a window of the kindness of and despite and wherever he went on these travels, he definitely had a lot of assistance from the indigenous peoples. So then he joins up with the trapping brigade. He goes with them just so he's not alone, and they're headed toward the coast. So he's headed away from where he wants to go. Now it's October 23rd, and he's ready to go again. He's healthy again. He starts going along the same side of the river. So he's going back to those two river crossings. So he goes over the first one. And then where he attempted to make a raft, his guide at this point does a signal fire, and a canoe's brought over, and then they are able to get across with two horses, and then he camps just down there. Just the hell that. So where he camps is about here. So he does the first crossing, he crosses here again, and then he's going to go and make his camp somewhere right around here. And he's finally on his way. The next day, he leaves his camp past a low-level ridge plain 4 miles long along the banks of the river. This is a photo looking, the Umpqua River is here on the left-hand side. This is the low-level ridge plain that I believe that he's referring to. And then the sandstone bluffs of Yellow Creek Mountain come down to the river there, and he's going to have to cut up and get through some pretty amazing old growth forests. A lot of these forests are still around today in patches. These are two photos that I took from my time up there that are very, very likely where he passed right through. The tree I'm standing next to would have been pretty huge when he passed through. Now he talks about coming to a bend in the river. This is important thing to flag too. Much fatigued by the last 5, being through deep gullies, rocky and obstructed fallen timber. The last 5, maybe not 5, maybe like 3, but who knows? To try and get horses and stuff around there, this is this map. So he would have crossed here. This is that flat plain, and then right about here is where the sandstone bluffs kick in, and he's going to have to kick up and come around here. Now, this is the bend in the river that he's talking about. It's a horseshoe. I mean, it's a hairpin turn of the river. Again, he wants to go southeast, and he is not intending to go west. This is where the river goes, 2 miles due west by northwest. And so I believe this bend in the river is where he this shows some of the topography. So this is Yellow Butte Mountain, or Yellow Creek Mountain, they call it. This is Tyee Mountain. So two significant landforms that are about 2,500 feet above the river. And why didn't he go up 138? Well, 138 was not there. This is Little Canyon Creek. It was probably such a log jam of fallen timber. It would have been, wasn't even an option. So about 2 o'clock, he writes he's going due east. So I'm guessing it's this bend in the river, he's going due east. Those pictures that I took of the trees, those were right here in Yellow Creek, where the BLM actually has a proposed timber sale, the Blue and Gold timber sale. If you want to ask them to maybe not do that, that would be a good idea. Anyway, so he goes from this bend, he's going due east, and 3,000 feet, so it's more like 2,500, pretty close though. There's a ridge here called Splinter Ridge. I did some research about like, so this is all old growth timber through here. It was old growth when he was through. And this is all old growth all the way down to there. And just massive trees. But right here is Spooner Ridge, and that is a south-facing bluff. It's relatively open, oak trees, and I'm not sure what condition it was in 200 years ago. There's been tree farms planted there, but that's likely because he mentions the Bear Hill, so more prone to wildfires, etc. Not as good growing conditions, soil. So now he has to come down. He crosses a small stream, 25 or 30 yards broad. The biggest creek there is the Calapooya, but that's quite a distance away. I'm guessing because the beavers hadn't been trapped out, so there are beaver dams all over the place. It had been raining a lot. The whole kind of hydrology of the area would have been different. So to come across a 20 or 30 yard stream, it's a very flat area there. And still, so I see a lot of water, even though it doesn't exist on the landscape today. These creeks are much more, controlled and sized on branches and stuff. So he comes in, it starts raining, it's a terrible storm. His tent gets blown down. He's rolling around in a wet blanket. There's giant trees crashing down. His horses are looking down sadly at him for comfort. He said it's like the most miserable ride. And he's been up and down the Columbia now for 2 years. So, and living in Vancouver. So it had to be a doozy of a storm. So now he is still heading for his pines that you heard about. I think he's probably camped over here when that storm happened. So now he's heading southerly toward Range of Mountains. Where Sweetser and everybody is kind of poked at is over here in the southwest, way across over here. And for him to have gone that way, he would have had to go southwest from crossing these mountains. And I don't think that's likely. Cleveland's mentioned, like he camped near there, but it doesn't really fit the map. So he's from up here doing the mileage. It roughly fits. He's coming to this river here. 13 miles where I crossed the river to the south side. When he says crossing the river, I'm guessing that's the North Umpqua River. He found a place where he could get in and out, shallow area with his horses. He doesn't mention any difficulty. He camps just a couple miles from there to dry everything out. The next morning, he leaves at daylight, which it's about 6:45 that time of year. Walks for an hour. Now he's seriously in a place probably where they have not ever seen a European American at all. They may have heard of him, and it's possible that some of them had traveled and met some of the trappers before. So this is where he's headed, I believe. This is the little hill on the right here. This bare hill is called Dodson Butte. The one on the left is Brushy Butte, a Golden Eagle site. And there's this wonderful, open pasture land, rolling hills, moving up into the foothills of this area. And so even though he says 15 or 20 miles just south, those are only like 9, but it fits. So that's, I believe, the route he traveled. And then this is his handwritten page from his journal, where he describes the sugar pine. 57 feet 9 inches. Again, that's 18 foot plus diameter. He describes the tree. I'm not sure if it's going to play. We'll see. Let's see here. Now that was as far as I got, and then recently, in the last few weeks, I was preparing for this. I came across a letter they wrote to one of the, I think it was the secretary of the Horticultural Society, that was instrumental in him coming out here. And in this, he writes that he met this pine beyond a range of mountains running in a southwestern direction from the Rocky Mountains toward the sea, terminating at Cape Warford. What he's talking about, the Rocky Mountains, is what he's calling the Cascades. I imagine he thought the Cascades and Rockies were the same thing at the time. Things weren't, other than Lewis and Clark, there was a lot of connection to, and then what he says by Cape Warford, I'm guessing is Cape Blanco. And this would be the range of mountains that he's talking about going southwesterly. This would be the Coast Range connecting to Tyee Mountain and Yellow Butte Mountain and over to the Cascades. So he's heading in a southeasterly direction from there. And this was interesting. It grows sparingly upon low hills, undulating country east of the range of mountains just mentioned, where the soil consists entirely of pure sand, which sounds like a beach. And I don't know 200 years ago what pure sand meant. I mean, it seems simple, right? Pure sand, but maybe it was, now we have maybe 100 different soil types, different, I don't know. Pure sand was maybe 60% pure, I don't know. But I did look up my friend Cindy, who works for the Soil and Water Conservation District, put together a map for me of percent sand areas in this region. So that I suspect he was at. Now, the blue areas are 34 to 47% sand soils. This little purple area is up to 70 3%. But it could be anywhere in here. There's some little pockets of public land that are still left that the BLM manages, that a little pocket that hasn't been cut, and there are some large sugar pines in that too. The sad fact is that the pines were the first ones, the settlers, when they arrived, they recognized that species right away. Made really pretty straight grain, light, easy to work with and to build with. So those trees came down and were used quite a bit, and they didn't. I haven't found any records, but so I've found, I think, the general area within, say, 5-10 miles of where it's got to be, right? So now, how cool it would be to really nail it down, and that would, because we've got it's going to be 17 months before it'll be the 200th anniversary of his visit. It would be kind of cool to like narrow it down. I don't know if maybe you have any other ideas or ways of inquiry. Now that it's got a smaller area, there's like older homestead maps and stuff I can kind of look at. I haven't looked at anything like this for 10 years, but maybe I will renew some efforts coming up. And it would be nice to just acknowledge this, wherever it was in Douglas County, in this area, and who knows, maybe have a little celebration. So any ideas, thoughts, or questions too about any of this, feel free. Oh, and then that's my contact information. So if anybody wants to email me about any ideas or something comes to mind in a day or two or whenever, let me know. Thanks for everybody staying awake out there. And I don't know if there are any questions, but
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, putting your email out there. You never know what will come through on Facebook or YouTube from your recording too, because that's the whole world that's going to see you now. Your first presentation. Good job. Thanks for doing that, and we appreciate you. Yeah, so there's an equal amount of people in Zoom as in here, which happens every month, it seems. It's kind of incredible how that happens. There hasn't been any questions there yet, but if anyone here has any questions, I'm sure you would raise your hand. Oh, we do have one here. You want to come back up, Eric? Because then people in Zoom, you might have to repeat the question so they can hear.
okay.
Especially if it's complex.
I'm sort of curious, it sounds like he's just wandering on his own. In 1830s, Ptolemy in Washington, he would hire Indians to guide him, to basically say, I want to go to this place, and then say, okay, we can take you there.
Right.
Didn't sound like he got anyone to guide him to where he wanted to go.
The question was, or the question is, did he have anybody helping him out, any guide with him? And he did. The first village he got to, and I did pass over a lot of kind of detailed information because I wanted to just kind of keep the narrative going. And if you read his journals, he does talk about there's a chief center nodes that provides his son, one of his sons, to be his guide. And I'm sure, and he's laser focused on finding this pine tree that produced the seed and has this big cone. So I'm sure that was communicated, and I'm sure that was where they were headed.
Help them some friends.
Yeah.
Artie says this was most excellent. I love the effort to try and retrace the steps, which, to your point, was not just some hike, but a lot of bushwhacking. I bet. dad, Reeder, I wonder who that is. Your brother, you said right earlier, yeah. He said, huh?
Delete.
He does have a question. What did he eat? Hiking like he did is exhausting. Is there any inside scoop on that?
Yeah, in the journals, he, at the camp in Elton, they were, the indigenous peoples brought him some fine salmon trout, and, like 2, 3.5 foot long. They drank some, I believe, myrtlewood, or California laurel, well, in Oregon, so it's myrtlewood tea, or, berries. He does with the day of the storm, and he's on that leg, he's running short of supplies. He does meet another group around the North Umpqua and has who provides some more fish for him, which he says was barely edible, but
Right.
he was hungry, so.
Right, okay. Oh, it's always fun reading about the explorers and having folks give you the.
Yeah, and the journals,
Yeah.
I would then go ahead and check them out. You can just download them online and read them. And a lot of his accounts are really up along the upper headwaters of the Columbia, and really fascinating. Lewis and Florida, climbing mountains, eating eagles, crazy adventures. But anyway,
Those people.
thank you.
Okay, if there isn't any more questions, I'm going to commence the talk meeting, and thanks for coming every month. Yeah, tastes good. All right. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time. Okay.